Denki Kaminari made his way through the foyer with his eyes searching the faces of those that walked by him. Each person, each agent, went about their day unaware of Kaminari's intent, while he mulled over the words Seek described days ago. He was sure that something was not right at the commission. He kept his ear to the ground, wondering about any news or developments on his case, if it were his case. The rush of footsteps echoed through the foyer, while large groups of agents exited the building. Kaminari watched their movements, overhearing the news from passers-by. A collapsed building in Esaha City, involving a few pro-heroes from Fat Guns.
Hey, who called the emergency?
Asked Kaminari.
Chief Agent!
Called a fellow before disappearing into the streets. His suspicions only grew, turning his back against the tide of agents flooding out from the building and continuing on his way through the foyer. Kaminari glanced to and fro, left and right, observing each agent until someone caught his eye. The man looked disheveled, dressed in a slight mess with a cap masking his face. He watched him saunter through the crowd of agents, walking against the tide. Suspicious, Kaminari followed after the man, keeping a distance away from earshot before he turned a corner, his pace quickening after a short glimpse. Damn it, he thought, before he sped his own pace, turning the corner to... The man grabbed hold of Kaminari's jacket, tossing him into the wall with a strong heave. It winded Kaminari before he grabbed hold of the man's wrists, staring at his cap that hid his face.
Hey kid, I don't want any trouble,
he warned, his sharp golden eyes peering out from underneath the cap. A moment passed while Kaminari stared into his eyes, recognizing them immediately.
Hawks?
He asked, catching the realization in the man's eyes before he slowly released the pro-hero from the wall.
Who are you, kid? Denki Kaminari, UA graduate, same as Tokoyami. I thought you retired. Now's not the time for a small chat.
Kaminari straightened himself on his feet, only to watch Hawks leave without another word, with Cap still atop his head. He wondered about the former pro-hero, but with the commission in slight disarray, he couldn't afford any more distractions. He needed to meet the agent who worked with him on this case.
Charge Bolt. Shouldn't you be patrolling?
Asked a voice from behind. Kaminari recognized it, turning to find the chief agent himself.
I can't stand still. Not until I know exactly what happened, explained Kaminari.
You're home. Right. You need to separate yourself from this. It's too close to home. No pun intended. We're doing everything we can to find out more.
The tone in his voice was dismissive, despite the man being one of the few forerunners of missions that involved Kaminari almost exclusively. It irked him to hear those words from the man, yet he swallowed the anger he felt.
Thanks,
replied Kaminari. He felt a firm pat on his shoulder before the agent left him be, his back turned on the pro-hero, ignorant of the suspicious glare Kaminari shot through him. Kaminari turned away, frustrated but vigilant, to find you. Walking the halls, he made his way into a quaint office, entering to find an agent by her desk, alone in the space. Thanks to the unfortunate event in Esaha City, most of the agents disappeared, leaving it eerily quiet. Odd for such an order to be made.
What have you found?
He asked, soon hovering over the agent. Oh, good. You're just in time, she started, her attention on her screen rather than Kaminari's presence. It took a while, but I had to implant a ghost to search the logs. This should tell us who had access to that anklet before the invasion. I hate to say it, but that explosion in Esaha was a saving grace. Kaminari didn't know how to feel about that. Everything seemed to be cascading like dominoes, one after another, falling into place. Almost how Seek described it. A list of access points and numbers appeared on screen, each one tracing to a name. It was the one good thing about the commission so far, Kaminari thought, while he scanned over the list. So far, all incriminating evidence pointed to him with access. However, he spotted something odd from the dates, times, and place of origin. Most access points to the anklet were switched on from the commission headquarters. "Oh, God," mumbled the agent while she skimmed through the notes herself. "He's not only been accessing the anklet, he's been dragging it from here." Kaminari saw the name on screen, seething with anger that resurfaced again. Dark, cold, and quiet. You expected that, but you laid on a firm stretcher, bleary-eyed while the sunlight lit the room from above. The sound of the sea caught your ear from the distance, while the sky stretched for miles up high. Your wrists were restrained to the stiff mattress, chained to the bed with hardly any room for movement. So far, nobody has come to visit over the coming days except for an old acquaintance. The man who kidnapped you, Atsuhiro. Short and brief while you woke the first time, discovering he chained you to the bed, ready for prep. It was hazy, but you had attempted to reach out, entering into the last person you connected with. That man, Seek. It felt odd, unlike others you had easy access to in the past. It was almost troublesome with the mind he had, but you were able to see through his eyes. Happy to find familiar faces from Kaminari's drunken reunion and that joyous Christmas night. Uttered words escaped those lips, but you couldn't determine which ones, almost feeling mute in the moment. It was an unpleasant feeling to think about. Being mute, being quiet, being unheard. It only brought back your regret recalling the last conversation you had with Kaminari. The doors caught your ear before the click of heels echoed in the room, now silently aware of what surrounded you. Beakers, glass cabinets, and along with the scent of the salty breeze, florals, flowers, bouquets everywhere. "Hello, Sirene," greeted a cool, gentle voice from above, spotting the doting eyes of a familiar face staring down at you. "You know too much." Your breath hitched at the smiling eyes of the doctor watching your reaction to her presence. You didn't keep your eyes off from her, following her every move before she stood beside the stretcher, still hovering over you in observation. I've not told a soul. No one knows." You pleaded with a steady breath, still with fear that seized the very core of your heart. That smile of hers was deadly. "Yes, no one knows," she breathed while she gently tucked your hair away from your face. "After all, no one needs to. When he arrives soon." From the edge of your stretcher, she reached out for a clipboard, flipping through and inspecting the pages. You figured that the doctor, the general, would have done a checkup once you entered wherever this place was. She was always clinical and thorough, but never blunt, which you feared the most. Staring at her reaction, her smile deepened, almost dotingly. You have some interesting developments," she mumbled, more so to herself than to you, her eyes trailing across your body, landing before your stomach. What was she staring at?
Let's test out a theory,
she mused, suddenly gripping your head onto the stretcher, her hands glowing golden before a heat burned into your temples. Your screams were silent, unable to utter a cry, before the searing white pain grew excruciatingly hot, then dull.
Now, Celine, listen to the sound of my voice, my tenor, my warmth, the rhythm of its speech. You are in control. Only to me,
whispered the doctor. Your body stopped fighting, but your mind was full, running in a sprint. It was like the warmth of a fire in a familiar home, settling back into the same routine, but the comfort was a trick of the mind. You had wished that you weren't at the receiving end of her quirk. The power of persuasion.
Now, Celine, who was the last person you spoke to?
The head agent, the chief, growled in pain, grasping his head after Kaminari had slammed it into the interrogation table. Kaminari glared at the man, cuffed to the table while his figure hunched over him under the fluorescent lights.
Where are they?
He asked with a snarl, surprising the agent, still nursing a new bruise.
I don't know who you're... You've been in communication with the Paranormal Liberation Front,
interrupted Kaminari, growing frustrated with the situation and the man before him.
That makes no sense. This is treason,
warned the agent, his eyes staring at Kaminari with disdain.
Even if you think it was me, there's no proof. You've only assaulted a commission agent. This is on your shoulders, Chargebolt. If we hadn't allowed you permission to take our only leverage on the front, we wouldn't be here.
A toss of photos slid across the table, all of them casting the commission's past with the agent, along with another. A woman.
You know the General,
emphasized Kaminari, pointing to the woman in the photos and soon running through every one that put the two of them together, up until the report that revealed the decommissioning of the woman. He noticed the change in the agent's eyes, sorrow driving his emotions at the sight of the woman on paper.
You've been doing her dirty work this whole time, in plain sight,
explained Kaminari, still staring the agent down.
Where are they?
He found the agent less than compliant, his eyes drifting elsewhere, refusing to answer. The rage grew tenfold, frustrated further at this man's refusal to speak, dismissing everything he asked. Kaminari contemplated his next move carefully, tempted to take matters to the next level he knew how. With a grab of the agent's cuffed wrist, he sent a minor charge. Then another. And another. Listening to the pitch of the agent's little cries until...
Tell me where they are!
It wasn't even at 1/10 of his output, but it felt enough to painfully induce the agent into compliance, his hands before him in surrender.
Okay.
He breathed, his hands shaking from the shocking experience.
They're on an island, not far from Musatafa's shores, near Endor. I don't know which one, but I can give you the place she told me to meet her.
Near his home. Under his nose. Hiding in plain sight. This whole time after your abduction, you weren't too far away. It angered Kaminari further now knowing and feeling this way, his fingers sparking with electrical charge that bounced between his fingers, clicking with every snap.
I told you what you wanted to know!
Snapped the agent out of fear.
Why?
Asked Kaminari, his golden glare staring into the agents.
They've been hiding for years from the front. So why now?
An immediate response was nowhere to be heard, only receiving the rasped breaths from the agent until Kaminari threatened once more with his palm close to the metallic table, his electricity bouncing about in between.
No one!
Cried the agent in haste, pulling at his cuffs in an attempt to back away from the dancing charge across the surface.
It's because of no one. The General needs them to find him.
The crackle of Kaminari's fingers stopped, bringing about the silence in the room. He recalled the word, or rather this name, when interrogating Seek in that basement. At first it was as Todoroki has commented, pure nonsense. But afterward it felt more like wordplay, like a secret code unspoken but hiding in plain sight. Everything was hiding in plain sight. It was your method for years running from the front, and it was everywhere he discovered.
She's been harping about him for years, even after she left this damn agency.
Continued the agent, catching Kaminari's ear.
Those photos were when she was my handler, and so were they. I stayed behind in the commission because I believed in bettering the city from within, but she still had her claws in me like a vice. I still listened to her whim. I couldn't tell if I did it out of my own accord or out of loyalty. It's foggy sometimes, but inside I felt like I was doing something to suit her without any quarrel. It was her quirk after all.
This confession set the gears in motion in Kaminari's mind. The way the Commission wanted to protect you as a witness and keep you out of the public eye was given your history in villainy. Yet he found it odd when he visited you that day in your cell, ironically furnished with the things you needed. The battle he had to convince the Commission to allow your so-called freedom with him soon became clear to their fervent resistance against the idea.
You wanted them quiet,
uttered Kaminari, realizing the interactions too late.
and now they're with them against their will.
Continued the agent, his head low, staring at the surface of the table he was cuffed to.
Placated by them, made pliable to suit her needs. It's already too late.
Echoed a voice in Kaminari's head, perking up from that odd sensation. That was your voice, fleeting as if you traveled through his brain from one ear to another. It was spectral, ghostly, merely a breath before it disappeared.
Hey kid, why don't I take care of things from here?
Followed another voice from the loudspeaker in the room, a very familiar one he recently bumped into earlier that day. Kaminari turned towards the mirror behind him, staring at his reflection, unknowingly staring at Hawks, who stood there in the room only lit from the window.
How long have you been standing there?
Asked Kaminari.
Long enough.
Replied Hawks in the speaker.
I've got questions now that you've piqued my interest. Better that you leave before anyone shows up from the collapse.
Kaminari turned a glance at the agent, his head still low, beaten after the confession. Without a thought, he made his way towards the door, leaving the agent behind with a slam. Down the hall, Kaminari noticed it was still empty of life. Perhaps the collapse was larger than he expected before he scrolled through his list of contacts on his phone. Texting away. Hiding in plain sight.
I know now. Head to Endor. See you there.
Silent. The basement was eerily silent for a bright morning. The sun's rays streamed through the small windows above the walls, leaving Seek some reprieve in the dimly lit basement. He sat on that creaking chair, rolling his shoulders while his hand massaged into the socket replaced by glass, cogs, and wheels.
"I'm sorry,"
uttered a voice behind him, echoing in his mind. Your voice. Soft, sorrowful, regretful. A tone he was famously familiar with while he smiled sadly.
Sugar. Now you will see what I see.
He mumbled before searing pain entered into his head. The force and pressure was immense, unlike the first attempt, crawling its way further into his mind, but not before it recalled a moment trapped in this basement. Back on that night, in the bathroom, staring into its reflective surface, into 14's toothy grin, her fingers tapping at the brim of her hat.
"Are you positive about your deductions this time around?"
warned 14 with a sullen tone.
"You've exhausted all favors, and this is your last."
Yes, trial and error and all of that tribulation.
Whispered Seek with dismay.
This one counts. I need everything that I have. All of it.
He remembered that smile, still sad while behind her hat she eyed his shoulder, creaking with the tiniest movement it made. Seek reached for it, massaging the edge of the glass compartment before he slowly removed his cloak, revealing its almost empty cavity, the bare minimum of cogs left to keep it still in motion.
Time moves differently between realms. All the pieces are ready to fall, including me.
Reassured Seek, tapping at his shoulder and staring into 14's face before he smashed his fist into the mirror. The memory faded, leaving Seek with no movement in his step, sitting on the chair with a straight back, still, unmoving, and his eyes aglow, golden, connected with your mind and filled with the sweet notes of your song. He stood to his feet, walking towards the center of the room with his gloved hands before him, glowing red against his skin.
"Now, Sirene, wreak havoc with your latest plaything,"
he heard faintly in the melody, unable to react before he swung his hands, opening a portal outside into the streets of Musatafu, alight in red. Under the influence, he walked through, leaving the empty basement before it closed with a snap.